gonna swim, bike, and run in the Kona sun. We're gonna swim, bike, and run in the Kona sun 2021.
Thank you, Poncho Man. Welcome everybody back to Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. My name is Bob Babbitt. We are brought to you by Hoka One One, by Challenge North America, by Credo Tri, Amp Human, VeloFix, Four Seasons Walleye, Normatec, Form Goggles, You Can, Canyon Bikes, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Right before COVID hit, we sent out 3,921 grants totaling $5.9 million to keep challenged athletes in the game of life through sports. Our next guest, Thorsten Radde, is the man behind Tri Rating. How you doing, Thorsten?
Hey, Bob, I'm doing fine. Not quite Kona weather for me here in Germany, but we're hanging on in all the COVID fun that's going on right now.
So what led to creating Tri Rating? You're an age group guy like me, and obviously a fascination with facts and figures. What got you to create Tri Rating?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have a background in computer science and all computer stuff and data analysis. And one of the things that I always found interesting is going into Kona 10 years ago or 15 years ago, who was the Kona favorite? It was pretty much the guy who won the race, or lady who won the race, that was closest to where you were. So for the North Americans, it was always the Coeur d'Alene winner, the Lake Placid winner. For the Europeans, it was always who won in Rot or Austria or whatever races you had there. And I thought there must be a better way than just coming up with some name that you know. And there must be some way of kind of mathematically comparing times from different courses and coming up with some way of analyzing that. And I thought it would be an easy, well, maybe a week here, build an Excel sheet and be done with it. And it turned out that there was a bit more work involved in getting a decent numbers, and much earlier that there wasn't really a database of results go anywhere. And I had to pretty much collect all that. And yeah, once I had that going, I realized there's some value and some interest by people just in the results database aspect of it, let alone the analysis part. And yeah, kind of things grew from there.
It's interesting because over the years, obviously, Ironman, Kona is such a huge event. People wanted to see those results, but finding them was hard. And especially if you try to think about other events, especially events other Ironman events or events that were one-offs, those results were basically impossible. People wanted to track down their own history. So I'd like to know how I did it at Kona in 1984. It's really hard to find that stuff. Did you find that people were coming to you going, oh my God, I've always wanted to know what my results were from these things?
Well, I mean, pretty much early on, I drew a line that I only want to focus on the pro results, because getting all the age group results would have been a totally different dimension again.
Totally.
I just don't have the time for that as a hobby of collecting all these little results and analyzing them. But I mean, even with the explosion of Ironman and Challenge and all the other events, pretty much we've got, well, in a normal racing season, we've got more than 100 races with pro fields across the globe. And some weekends it's 3, 4, or 5 different races that you need to get the results for and put them together. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of manual work. I try to automate as much as possible, but there are certain aspects that just don't make sense to automate. But people appreciate being able to get a list of all the results that I have for them. And I mean, just people like Lindsay Corbin came up to me and said, Thorsten, how many Ironman results do you have for me? I think I have 39. I think it was 40. And my first Kona was way back then when she wasn't even racing as Corbin, but under her maiden name. And there's just so many things that we can dig up there that a lot of people like to look at and have a compact view of where they've been, how they've done across the globe. I mean, probably some results that people would rather forget or prefer to forget, but a lot of good memories from races across the globe now.
So do athletes come to you sometimes go, hey, wait a second, you ranked me 7th, and I think I should be ranked higher than that.
Oh, of
Anybody ever-
course.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the way that I usually tell, if you ask 20 people who should be in the top 10, you get 30 names, and it's pretty tough to pick between these 30 names. But top 10 is just 10 names, so there's always someone who's disappointed he didn't quite make the top 10, or feels that I have a personal vengeance against him or her, or something like that. But usually I have pretty good, at least I can explain how I arrived at the numbers that I do calculate. Most of that is automated by now, and I have a pretty elaborate algorithm for that. So I can have a lot of scenarios that are taken care of. But there's always little things. I should have been rated a couple of minutes quicker here. And how come you predict me going 3:02 where I think I can go at least 2:55 or stuff like that? So there's a lot of sometimes good-natured, sometimes not quite so good-natured ribbing about the numbers that I come up with.
What's fascinating to me, I mean, this is not your job, right? This is
not at all.
This is a hobby. This is something you do because you love it.
Yeah. I mean, I make my money as an IT consultant, so that kind of fits in with what I'm doing here. But the Kona stuff is just, the number stuff is just a hobby that I like because I enjoy doing it. I like getting in touch with a lot of the pros across the globe who are appreciative of the data that I have and come up with questions and analysis and stuff like that. And I mean, making money of it, pretty much I put up a report before Kona that people can donate for. And that's pretty much the only money making part of it that I do for that. It's just fun. And most of the replies are friendly. So I enjoy continuing to do that.
What's always been fascinating to me is back in the day when I had Competitor Magazine, we were covering running, triathlon, cycling, mountain biking, all different types of sports. And in those days, you'd have Simon Whitfield at these ITU races or guys like that running 28 minutes for 10K off the bike. And all my running guys would come to me and go, who measures these courses?
Right.
These courses there's no way these guys are running 20 minutes. And it really hit me that besides the Kona course, because I know that had been certified because it was actually a Boston Marathon qualifier, I wasn't really sure, and still aren't, how many races are certified. So when you're looking at marathon times from a race, do you know if that course has been certified or not?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the current Kona course is still certified after the recent changes that they've had out on the highway. But we know at least that's pretty much in the same ballpark. And of course, the Kona course is always a hard one with the heat and humidity that you have in the latter part of the day. But I mean, that's part of what I'm trying to do is looking at the pure numbers and say, was this a fast course or was this a slow course? And I'm not going into an analysis of why that was. I mean, there could have been drafting on the bike, and that's why the bike times were so fast. The bike course could have been short, and that's why everyone has been riding quicker than expected. But at least I can give a number to that and make that comparable to other courses on other days, and be able to say, well, best run in 2020 was XYZ. On, I don't know, 2019, we had Challenge Madrid, which had really slow times because the conditions were really hard. But from a performance viewpoint, some of the times there were probably among the best that we've seen all year, even if they were in the 250s rather than the low 240s that we've seen for Kona. And the numbers that I ran pretty much give you at least an indication of was this a good performance or not so good performance from that athlete.
So when you're doing your rankings, you look at Ironman 70.3, Challenge, Super League, ITU, WTS. Now, do you have to include virtual as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started with Ironman, and then I wanted to be able to kind of replicate the KPR system. So I needed to add the 70.3s. So that's when I moved into the half distance as well. And now we have a lot of people that move up from ITU to the half distance. Yes. So at least I want to be able to have races. And that's why I added some of the WTS stuff. So far I have refrained from adding all the virtual stuff because, I mean, the numbers to run on that would be quite tricky. And I hope it's just not going to be something that we need to be concerned with too much a year or two from now. Hopefully we'll be back to real regular racing on the outside with tons of people out there rather than the virtual stuff that probably everyone needs to be concerned with right now.
So when I look back at the 89 race, Mark and Dave, and I love the fact that they're still ranked in their marathons with 240 and 241. I think they're still ranked like third or fourth all time in
yes. Yeah, Mark and Dave
time.
are still the second and third fastest runners in Kona. Only Patrick has run quicker than Mark twice, but Frodo hasn't. None of the other winners have run quite that fast.
So when I look back at the overall times from back then, right, and you look at the swim is a couple minutes off, the runs are the same. Everything's in the bike. And have you seen that in terms of your evaluation over the years? Has the biggest change been just the equipment from the cycling side? And obviously the training is a little different. When you look at 89 to now, it seems like besides the huge chunk, I think Mark Allen's best ride was 428 or something in that ballpark. And now Cam has gone 408. Is that where you see it as well? The cycling has made a huge difference?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the pure finishing times, obviously the bike is where the biggest differences have occurred between the Mark and Dave days and now. But what has also changed is the dynamics of the race. You just have much tighter fields on the bike. You don't have quite that much separation occurring on the bike, which kind of might add to the quick bite times. But the tricky question will be, and I don't know if I'm the right one to answer that, how much of that improvement that we've seen on the bike is due to better technology on the bike, better positioning of the athletes on the bike, more aerodynamic setup of the bikes themselves, and how much is due to better training, better nutrition, better ways of dealing with that situation. I find it fascinating that the bike times have improved quite that much, as you said, probably 20 minutes for Mark, from Mark and Dave's time to now, and similar for the females too. But that the run times haven't quite moved that much. So that's certainly testament to what fantastic athletes Mark and Dave have been in their time, and how competitive you could speculate they would even be if they were racing today in their best shape. I mean, that's always a fun question to discuss, I think.
So without PTO this last year, that would have been a tough for the pros. I mean, it would have been brutal for them. How has this changed for you? Because obviously with more dollars coming in, you're going to see pros staying in the sport longer, racing at a higher level. It means more when there's $100,000 for one race. The investment from PTO has certainly created more interest from the pro side, don't you think?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've run the numbers, and pretty much the prize money that was doled out in 2020 would have been at 10% of what it was the year before. If you just look at Ironman, and well, Challenge has had one or two smaller races. ITU has gone down quite a lot. Super League just had a virtual event. ITU just had one WTS race. So 10% of the prize money is about what was paid out. Whereas then you add in the PTO money, which pretty much was 3 million something across the board. I don't have the exact number right there, but it was way beyond what Ironman has spent last year. And frankly, a lot of people have made their sole money through what the PTO provided with their bonus money that they paid out in March, with the support for all the small races, and then the big event in Daytona, which validated kind of their business model. And I'm really looking forward to what is going to happen with them in the 2021 season, how they will impact the racing in 2021 and beyond. And if Ironman can continue with that slowly eroding prize money from year to year, or whether they need to step up their game too and make it more interesting for the pros to compete in their races, other than Kona, of course, which is still the crown jewel that Ironman holds.
What I loved about Challenge Daytona was the mix of the athletes, from the Olympic distance athletes to the 70.3 specialists to the Ironman world champions, all of them at one place. For you, was it hard to sort of figure out, okay, who is a favorite here? But I've got Gustav Eden, and I've got, you've got Annie Hogg, Ironman world champion, and trying to figure that out because a lot of these guys had never raced each other before.
Yeah, and I mean, based on the data that I have, at least I know Gustav is a very, very, very good 70.3 distance athlete. Yes. I wouldn't be able to predict what he'd be able to do on the Ironman distance, of course, but we know he's done a couple of really fast 70.3s, won the worlds in Nice, won a number of the other races, went always really fast. So I knew he would be kind of a favorite. But take someone like a Vincent Louis, who's never done anything longer than Olympic distance. How do you want to predict what he's going to be able to do? So that was one really hard aspect. And the second really hard thing was it was over a weird distance, over a weird course.
Yes.
You've had the swim at 2K, which was kind of predictable, but then you had this. What was it? What was the bike? 60K?
The bike ride was just under 50 miles, right?
Something like that. So 80K, dead flat. How fast would people go? It was a different distance the year before, so I didn't even have any historical data from the course there. And then is 18K running different to 21K running? How will that impact the shorter course versus the long course guys? So a lot of balls that I needed to juggle to come up with at least some kind of prediction for Daytona, and a lot of people just plain didn't agree with what I had up there.
It was interesting, and I was on the same page as you. I thought that Holly Lawrence would probably be one of the first people off the bike. I thought she would. And I was surprised that Paula outrode her by over 4 minutes.
Yeah,
that really was a surprise because Holly was one of those longer distance athletes who swims really well and wouldn't be that far behind in the swim. You'd figure she would have ridden through. Were you surprised as well?
Yeah, that's what I thought Holly would do. I mean, just again from a technical viewpoint, I would have thought that if Paula or Lisa, when they rode by Holly, that Holly would try to stick with them. Because she'd be in front of them after the swim, and then when they move through on the bike, that she would be able to try, or at least try to stick with them. So I don't know if she didn't feel 100% or if that was her technical decision to let them go because she thought they'd ride a bit too hard and then struggle on the run, which unfortunately was the case for Lisa, but not at all for Paula. So really surprising that Holly did not do better in Daytona. I mean, fourth obviously is not a bad result at all, and she made a nice chunk of money. But I would have thought she'd be more in the running for the win, which she never really was once Paula and Lisa moved through.
What do you look at as the fastest Ironman course in the world?
Well, that's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Because obviously you have changes between different years. The fastest one from the data that I have would be Florida is obviously up there with the dead flat bike course, and usually relatively good conditions for a run. Barcelona is also a fast one. I'm not sure whether that is because the course might be a touch short or whether it's just at a perfect point in the season. It's in early October when conditions in Spain are still relatively nice. So that could be, but those two would probably be the fastest at this point. Sweden had a couple of weird years where, I don't know, I think they had some issues with course lengths at some point. Wind was blowing sometimes in the right direction for the athletes. So they had one or two really fast years, but moved back to something more normal again. Yeah, but those would be the ones. I think I have a list up there on my site that kind of compares the different courses and kind of gives you a number of the time difference that would make for a pro athlete.
In terms of toughest courses?
Wales is obviously up there with really, really tough conditions in the swim, lots of uphills and downhills on the bike too. Lanzarote is there. With again the wind there comparable to what you get in Kona, and then I have Malaysia also, which is with the heat. That's always a tricky course, and sometimes Malaysia is also hard because it's at a weird point in the season after Kona. So some people go there as kind of their return race after not so good Kona. and then maybe having a good one like Javi did last year in 2019. But those are, I mean, and you could easily have 30, 40, 50 minutes between the fast courses and the slow courses, even for someone who's a pro, who's finishing in around 9 hours. So huge, even larger differences for the age groupers there.
What I've noticed is some athletes really thrive on those tough courses. If you look at a Jesse Thomas before he retired, Wildflower, Wales, Lanzarote, it didn't really, the flatter type of courses really he didn't do as well at. You see that some athletes are, like with horses, some horses are better in the mud than they are on a flat track. So you see some certain athletes that the tougher the conditions and the tougher the course, the better they're going to do.
Yeah, Jesse is a good example, although Jesse raced well in Route as well when he was going sub-8 in his last long distance race there. So obviously a good athlete all around. But that's, I mean, probably the recommendation that I give most to people when they ask me where should I race. And usually my answer is leave aside all these considerations of what is a fast course or what is a slow course. Think of which course suits your preferences to as much as possible. Do you like to race in the heat? Do you freak out when there's a lot of wind going there? Is heat something do you like hills? So maybe Embrun might be a race that you would consider, even if you're probably not going to break any records there, but it just might be comparatively a good race for you to race in those conditions that you excel at. Or I mean, look at Daniela when she raced Alpe d'Huez, weird distance, but she almost was faster on the bike than the male winner there. And it's just totally up to what kind of events do you like, what kind of scenery, what kind of course type do you prefer, and go pick that and race there. Maybe it's closer to where you live, so you don't have to travel that far. Maybe it's a good point in the season, so a lot of parameters going in there.
When you're doing your predictions on Kona, do you take into account that how many races people have done leading in? Because to me, it blows me away. Some of these people coming in with 3 and 4 Ironmans under their belt, coming to Kona when Jan Frodeno might have done one other just to validate. Is that a big factor for you?
Yeah, I tried to figure out if there's any correlation between either the number of races they've done before Kona, or say the 12 months before, or the kind of break they have between their previous Ironman and Kona. But it was really hard to nail that down. Probably the best that I can come up with is that most winners have done 0, 1, or 2 Ironmans in the 12 months before. One of those potentially being the Kona 12 months before, when people even didn't have to requalify or so. So usually if you're racing at the very, very top of the field and Kona is the one result that you're really concerned with, typically I tell people to race less. But obviously you have a lot of people where the economics might play out differently. If you don't have a realistic chance of going for a top 10 and putting all your eggs in the Kona basket is a risky proposition. And often you're better off doing a number of smaller races, making some money there, and then maybe being present in Kona for your sponsors and having media appearances and so on, even if you're not convinced you're in the running for a top 10 performance there.
So who has surprised you in Kona? Somebody who was off the radar, somebody you hadn't really thought that much about, who had a performance in Kona that surprised you?
How far back do you want to go?
I don't care. How far back do you want to go?
Well, I mean, one person that surprised me was Patrick Lange when he was first time when he was racing in Kona. He had third. He got third with the course record on the run. When he was basically coming into the race, not even having done an Ironman, because he qualified in Texas, which was the year when the Texas race was shortened.
Right.
So he hadn't even done the full Ironman yet, and then was able to go there. That was probably the biggest upset in the most recent years. Let me think back. Annie last year, though, she proved she could race well, but I didn't think she have that kind of performance in her in Kona with that fantastic run after the weird season that she's had the year before with the injury and just coming over that. So but there's always at least one person on the podium that you probably wouldn't have picked before. Usually my saying is, well, one is an obvious one. The second one is among those that you probably consider among those with a good chance of a podium finish. You probably have a handful for that. And then you have one that's usually coming from, well, nowhere might be a bit too much, but probably not in the first rung of athletes that you had for a podium finish. So last year, maybe, yeah, TO, again, one of those stories that you probably wouldn't have picked TO for a Kona performance, especially knowing all the things that only came out after the race. He didn't have a fantastic performance the year before, and then the run injury, he probably wouldn't have picked himself for a podium finish there. So that was a big surprise there.
The trend I see that a little concerning, but it's also real, is a number of athletes. I look like 2019 when Joe Skipper and Ben Hoffman both had really good races in Kona, and then just a few weeks later, they go to Florida, and both of them ran sub 240 and went 746 and 748. And when I talked to both of them about that, they both said the same thing. And normally they would wait till Arizona, but they felt they got a little flat, that they had all this fitness coming off of Kona. It was only going to be 3 weeks. So just leave the bike in the box and then pack it up and do a little refresher stuff and go to Florida. My guess is we might be seeing more of that because they're having more success, but I'm concerned about the long-term effect on the athlete doing that many marathons close. No world-class marathoners running 2 marathons in 3 weeks. It's crazy.
We've seen in the past, we've seen these kind of more like stunts where people do back-to-back Ironmans within a week, with just a week or two apart, and often doing the second one better than the first one because they kind of use the training effect from the first one to lift them up in the second race. The tricky thing, and I guess that's where your point comes in, is what's the ideal difference between the first one and the second one, where you can still benefit from the training quote unquote that you've done in the first Ironman without falling into that flat after the race. And maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks is pretty decent for that. And maybe the distance to Arizona, which is, I think, 7 or 8 weeks after Kona, is trickier to get right, because then you just can't have recovery and then maybe 1 or 2 sessions to wake up the legs again, and then it's race time again. If you're looking at 8 weeks, you almost have to prioritize that again, have a harder session, have a smaller session, and maybe that's hard to get completely right. Although Heather Jackson got it right 2 years ago when she set the American record there, so it's not impossible, but I guess it's much harder to get it right on point for that one.
So if Kona happens this year, which I'm hoping, what I'm excited about is nobody has to validate. So we know that Jan and Patrick and all the champions, Marinda, they're in. And then you've got Gustav and Alistair and Javier that have already qualified. They're all in. So, I'm excited because none of these guys have to do a long distance race before October. And it could be one of the best years ever. How do you look? I know it's pretty far in advance, but how do you look at this next year's Kona, knowing that we know who's in the race right now, and we've got some horses already qualified?
Yeah, for all the athletes that you mentioned, I think we're going to have a situation where they will have one big race even before Kona. For those that are more looking towards the Olympic distance, it's going to be, hopefully, fingers crossed, the Olympics and the prep for that race. For the others, they can do a race in Rot or somewhere where they lined up before. So Rot should be, if it's going to happen, a super stacked field again. They had pretty much everyone lined up last year, the whole Kona podium, men and women, top 3 racing there. So I hope that's going to happen this summer. And then we'll have, hopefully everyone going at it again in Kona. And it'll be a really, really tricky to figure out how that is going to do. Is Gustav going to do his first Ironman there, or is he going to do one in training? Maybe he's going to just do one with his buddies in Norway, and then just to know what he's signing up for. I know Christian Blumfeld is probably interested in doing an Ironman race too, though he would still have to qualify. So not sure how that will do. But Frode will be there. Sebi will be there. Ben Hoffman will be there. Theo will be there. Pretty much everyone that you always have lining up there will be there. Braden Curry, the Australians who are racing, the New Zealanders down there. It's just good. I mean, pretty much the same thing you have every year. Everyone will be in Kona. Plus, this year you will also have a good chance that those who usually focus on the shorter distances throughout the year, Gustav, maybe Alistair, Javi Gomez, all those would also have a chance with a decent preparation going into Kona. So all will have some more experience compared to last year, and will be even more interesting. I mean, similar things on the females. Don't know what Lucy is going to do this year. Annie hopefully going to be healthy. Maybe a couple of the 70.3 athletes. Holly talked about doing an Ironman. Yes. We'll see. As always, you'll have a really deep field in Kona. You'll have a good mix of athletes, and you have 10 people that could end up on the podium, and no one will be surprised, I guess.
Love it. So Thorsten, we'll have to do this again as we get closer to Kona and we know that the race is happening. We know who's qualified. It's really a treat to have you on the show and get a chance to chat with you.
Well, always fun to talk triathlon, especially in these days when there's not that much racing happening. I had the fun of analyzing the race that happened in New Zealand last weekend. So lots of speculation about Kyle Smith winning his fourth 70.3 distance in 4 attempts, beating Braden and a number of the other really good Southern Hemisphere athletes. So who knows? Always a joy trawling through the results there and coming up with names that maybe people don't have quite that high on their list yet. And always fun to chat with you, who is also one of those who goes through the lists and knows the names and has the perspective to figure out what it'll mean in the long run.
So hopefully we'll do this in Huggos. Now, do you come over to Kona?
Yeah, I've been over in Kona once. It's just very, very long trip for us. And as you know, I'm still having a jobby job that pays the bills. So taking the time off, coming to Hawaii, and not just doing it for the week to be in the race, but if we take the long trip over, we want to spend some more time there. And then we firmly have it planned for 2022. My wife is going to have a sabbatical again, and that will be the definite next time in Kona. Yeah, and I know I need to find someone who pays the plane ticket for 2021, I guess.
Thorsten, thanks so much for taking time.
Always, Bob, and take care, and hope to see you in Kona or at some other race course.
Thorsten Radde has been our guest again. Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. See ya.